Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Allison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide.
And it's Monday again.
Hi, peeps.
You know it's Monday because we're on every Monday.
Because we're here.
Right?
Yeah.
Also, you know we're on because it's Monday. It's like how you teach kids days, but that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk about something that we alluded to, hinted at in our last episode, and that's what is actual evidence of children's learning, because it's not crafts.
Right. And I do think that's like one of the questions we get the most is like, but the parents want the crafts. And it's like, but do they?
Or people say
them. They don't need them.
Right.
Yeah.
Or people say to us, well, how do I show what the kids are learning? And in a prior episode, maybe the last episode, I said that I had some pictures of things that I could screen share and I have them ready.
Yay.
If you are joining us on a podcast listen only venue right now, it's fine. We'll describe them to you, but you can also hop over to our YouTube channel at some point to see the things that we're talking about. And we are on YouTube as How Preschool Teachers Do It. We have our own URL. It's going to be really easy for you to find. And you can go and take a look at the things that I'm going to screen share. If you are on YouTube, just bear with us as we kind of describe things. There's lots of ways that teachers can gather evidence of a lot of things, not only what children learned. We can gather evidence of what they already know, what they want to know, what they did learn. Know, want to know, and learned are KWL charts. You're going to see some of those in this episode. Yeah. And then the actual evidence, and I think pretty impressive from preschoolers that we can send photos home of to show families the actual learning.
Yeah.
In addition to things like photos of the materials you're using, the activities as children do them, right? We can take photos. You have to be careful, though, about taking pictures of kids and sending it home. Not only do you have to have the right permission, but I know a lot of parents, and potentially I could be one of them, would be looking at the pictures thinking, why is my child never in the picture? So you don't want to spend a lot of time staging pictures to make sure everybody's in them, which is why I often tell teachers, you know what, if you just take a picture of the materials you've used and described what you're going to do with them, or just the backs of children, if you can manage that without a lot of time being spent on positioning people, then fine. But otherwise, just materials or the sort of thing that I'm about to show you.
Yeah, take a picture of that, send that home. Yeah.
Because I think you will see that they're a good use of time. And I want to say this also to the people who are listening. Allison, who's really familiar with the sorts of things I'm going to show you, was reviewing the pictures that I wanted to share with me. And she said, she looked at one and went, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I've done that with kindergartners. I don't know if I've done it with preschool. I like that. So you never know.
Totally stealing this idea.
So you never know what idea you will see that, even though you're aware of how to do this, will kind of prompt you to think about new ways or different things or switching it up a bit.
Yeah, it's why keeping an open mind and talking with fellow teachers and educators, you could have been teaching for 30, 40 years and something new will pop up and you're like, wow, I never even thought to do it that way. And then you can introduce it in your class and see how it works for you. That it's a great networking opportunity,
Yeah. And we also have to keep in mind that everything I'm going to show you comes from preschools that are part of their state's quality rating systems. They're doing really high quality level stuff in their classrooms.
Yeah.
And at the same time, some of the things that I'm going to show you come from classrooms that have both general education and special education students, and everyone is able to participate at their own developmental level.
Yeah.
That's one of the beauties of the project-based learning approach, to just make sure we're all on the same page and remind everybody the purpose of project-based learning is to help children find answers to their own questions through their explorations and experiments. And so you're going to see children's questions. And we do that by providing them with opportunities to participate in hands-on activities. The topics are always based on the real world and real life and things that children are familiar with. Because just like you don't understand the things that you're surrounded by every day, neither do the children. When I do this training, I often ask people to name something that they use every day of their lives and they don't know how it works. And the list goes on and on and on, from things like the toilet all the way up to the smartphone, you know?
The smartphone, the telephone in general, even old landlines. I don't get that, but
I would still like to know.
Record players also, I have no idea.
Something about the grooves. And I would still like to know how the fax machine works.
How does that, thank you.
No one uses it anymore, but okay.
But hey.
I would like to know how that works.
How does it work? Yeah.
And the children feel the same way about the world. Everything's new to them. They don't understand how anything works.
Yeah. Well, there's even adults that, like, I've had it where like a question would come up from a child and you'd be like, I honestly have no idea, you know, and I've been around trees or whatever it is we're learning about for decades, but I have no idea. And then you're learning with them, you know, because there's always more to explore and more to learn.
Right. When I go into the visuals, I'm just going to point out some highlights. And I'm going to do that. This is the longest lead into a screen share that I think I've ever done.
It's going to be good. It's going to be totally worth it though.
Okay. Thank you, Allison.
See?
I'm going to go into the screen share and hopefully this will record well and show well on YouTube. Who knows?
Never know.
But here we go.
Yeah.
What we're looking at now is the beginning of KWL charts. We have the what do you know and what do you want to know? And you can see the topic here is balls. In full disclosure, this is one of the topics in Teaching Strategies Creative Curriculum. Though I work with other schools who don't use that specific curriculum, but still study the topic of balls, because there's so much children can learn about movement and motion, about the composition of things, just so many things. And so we start project-based learning topics by asking children what they already know about the topic once they've had a chance to manipulate objects. They have to be hands-on in it to express to us what they already know and what they're curious about. And this is these are really well done charts that we're looking at because they have the children's name and then exactly what they said without editing or grammar or, you know what I mean? The teacher just wrote what they said. And in fact, you can see if you look down at the what do you know about balls chart, that there was a child who said, I don't have any, I don't know. And she wrote that down because doing a KWL chart is an exercise in language and literacy, not some sort of test of what they know. So whatever they say, we write down. It teaches children to connect the spoken word to the written word.
To the written word, yeah.
Yep. So the children knew some things about balls. They knew that you can roll them when you go bowling. That tells me a little bit about this child named Chris. Chris is someone who bowls. That's a nice little piece of information about their personal life. They talk about how they bounce them and roll them. Hunter has baseballs in his house. Lots of talk about bouncing them, throwing them, rolling them, because children are so interested in that. And in fact, if you look over at the chart next to it, it's still what they're asking about, which I know is a little bit hard to see. But I will tell you that kids asked things like, can you bounce them on your shoes?
That's cool.
Do big balls fit under the table?
Yeah.
Can you bounce them, softly?
Oh.
I think that says softly. Yeah. And one child wanted to know if they're like planets. So we know that somehow, somewhere, that child was exposed to pictures of planets, and we might want to ask questions about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, this is what they're interested in. And so these are the sorts of experiments that you would set up. Allison, what were you going to say?
That's what I was just going to say. This, as a teacher, all these questions, well, first off, this K part, the no part, gives you like your baseline of like, where do I need to start? Because some of these topics that you might have, they might not know anything about it. And then, okay, we got to start from the bottom up. And some of them, they might already kind of know a lot about certain topics. So, like, okay, I don't have to go all the way to the bottom. We can start here in the middle and see where it takes us. But then this W part, the want to know, look at all these little experiments that could be happening based on their questions. Can you bounce them off your shoes? Well, I'm taking balls outside and we're going to try to bounce them off our shoes. And that's going to be an activity one day. How many balls can fit under the table? Well, one day I'm bringing in a whole bunch of big balls and we're going to see how many fit under that table, because by the end, I want to be able to answer as many of these questions, if not all of them, as I can. And it basically kind of tells you hey, Liam wants to know how many fit under the table. Today, that's what we're going to do. Let's find as many big balls. Let's do this table. Let's do a round table. Let's do a rectangular table. Let's find a bigger table. And you can just keep going and going and going with this. And it answers their questions and also teaches them more about balls.
Yes.
Which is what they're
And I can tell you that this teacher, with the question, can you bounce them off your shoes, started with shoes, but then had them bouncing balls off of all different sorts of materials to see which worked better. Here's another chart. This chart, the only problem that I have with this chart, which is about trees, again, a topic very familiar to children, part of a couple of different curriculums, right? Trees, or at least a general project-based learning approach. The only thing that I gave the teacher about this chart was that it didn't include the children's names, and it should. We should put the children's names next to what they said. And I thought that this was a good thing to show, though, on the podcast, because it's the whole KWL, what they learned. So what children learned from their experiments with trees was that they have pine cones and there are oak trees. And there's another comment about pine cones. So the pine cones really impressed them. Childhood pine cones can have sap on them. So that tells you what they were doing. Bark can have holes in it. Some bark is white. Let's see. Bark protects the trees. So they did a lot of things having to do with the bark of trees. I know that this teacher took a picture of this and sent it home to the families at the end of this study.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's why she didn't put names. Who knows? Maybe there were children who didn't answer.
Yeah.
But if you look at the last answer under the learned column, it says oxygen comes from leaves.
Yeah.
I feel like bells should be ringing or something. What an amazing concept for young children to learn. And this teacher did talk to them about how oxygen stays in our bodies when we breathe in. It's part of the air. And she did all sorts of breathing exercises with them when they learned about that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
So it's really great. Allison is still looking.
I am. It's great.
I'll show it to you more later.
I love reading their stuff. It's just
know.
great. So many teachers are just so talented and doing such great stuff out there.
They really are.
Yeah.
They really are. I just put up a chart paper from a class that was going to be studying animals and pets. And she asked them, what is an animal shelter, to determine what they already know to figure out where she should go with it. There was one child who was sort of accurate, who said, if you're in the jungle and see puppies and kittens, you give them shelter. So what we know about Lindsay is she understands the concept of shelter.
Yes.
Not necessarily animal shelter, but shelter.
Yeah.
Other children, however, said things like it's where animals hide if they see a bad one. It's a cage for animals. I mean, sort of. Maybe this child saw animals in a cage in a shelter. I don't know.
But this gives you a good starting off point here, is because a lot of these in this class don't seem to really know what happens at an animal shelter, right? So it seems, or even like saying a cage for animals, and maybe that was her impression of it, but you could teach how this is what the shelters do, and this is where the animals live inside the shelter. I mean, it gives you your jumping off point, which is great.
Yeah, I love that Marsden said it's where animals hang out together and play hide and seek. That's so cute. So cute. It's, the children attributing human characteristics to animals, but I believe we all do that with our pets.
Everybody does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these things we've been showing you have evidence of what children know, want to know. One of them had evidence of what children learned, but let me show you some more evidence of what children learned.
Yeah.
I give you a study of plants and trees being done with toddlers. And this toddler teacher started to show them the beginning of graphing. So she's got the columns for the different colors of leaves, green, red, yellow, brown, for the leaves that they collected as a toddler class when they were outside. Yeah. She sat on the floor, put this chart paper on the floor, put leaves all around the floor where the children were sitting and scrunching them and ripping them and whatever toddlers do when they are surrounded by leaves. And she asked them for certain colors of leaves and asked them to help her put it in the right column on the graph. Because what she was teaching was the beginning of graphing.
Yeah.
Which is so much more of a useful evidence of learning for the years to come than the ability to put decorations on a pre-cut leaf. I'm sorry, but this is going to set up the children. I'm not sorry. This is going to set up the children for future mathematics.
Right.
She was obviously working with these toddlers about color. And when I said to her, the kids enjoy doing this, she said, oh, they were having so much fun crunching the leaves and handing them to me.
I bet. Right? I mean, what a great thing. I mean, in this little chart here, there's so much that was going on. Like, she taught them about leaves. It shows that leaves come in different colors. Leaves come in different shapes. They're crunchy and what they feel like, because she had them crunch it, graphed it, and reviewed colors all in the same this one graph here. Probably counted how many greens, how many reds, how many yellows. I mean, there's so much learning going on in this activity, which is way more than what would have happened if she said, let's take this leaf and glue it onto a paper and make something out of it, right?
Yes.
That's the point.
Yes.
Right?
And again, this photo was sent home to families with an explanation. And that explanation included what the children did. So the children gathered leaves. They had the opportunity to use their senses to explore the leaves, because at this age, the children use their senses and connect concepts that way, right? We all do, but particularly at this age. The teacher also sent home the standards, the adult language, the goals that this meets. So she said, for example, this meets standard, and she gave the number from their state standards and what the standard was about children learning to organize information in preschool. That's what she sent home. So the parents went, oh, they're learning how to organize information so that they'll be able to graph independently in the future. And look at what they did. This, folks, is what you want to do. Here's another one. This is a beginner's graph. These are very young children doing sink float experiment. So the graph, I guess we could call it a graph, right? Yeah. The graph has two columns. One is sink, one is float. They took these items, and those of you looking on YouTube can see the paper is wet, because these were the items, the actual items that these very young children were putting in water to see if they would sink or float. And then they would take them out of the water, bring them to the chart, and the teacher helped them put it in the correct column.
Yeah. This is great.
Right. And then the teacher taped these items to a drier version of this chart. So that they could preserve it and revisit it. And again, this is sent home to families to say, we were learning about sink and float. This teaches the science standard, blah, blah, as well as the math standard. And she gave that to them. She explained how they did it. And what it teaches their children. And I think over to the left, you can actually see somebody's feet. This was on the floor, as you can see.
I see that. Cute. Really cute.
Right. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you sent this home to families and said, here are the learning standards that lead to the later learning and why we're doing it, I'm telling you, parents are
Oh,
impressed by
absolutely.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have another one that also shows evidence of learning. This is a display in a teacher's classroom. They were, and you on the top left, the teacher has explained what they were encouraged to do. This was displayed where families could see it. It shows pictures of children exploring, and it says, students were encouraged to use their senses to smell, touch, and see during our investigation of a pumpkin. They were studying pumpkins. Children pulled out the seeds onto their plate and began to view and count their seeds. And she has pictures of the children doing it.
Yeah.
Then at the bottom, she has another sign, and it says, students enjoyed making cupcakes. We followed a recipe. Folks, that's following directions with very young
Yes.
children. We followed a recipe and added ingredients. That's how you teach children to follow directions, not doing your craft.
Not doing the crafts. Yeah.
This is a real life thing. They're going to follow recipes their whole life. They're going to follow step-by-stepness their whole life. We all had a turn to mix everything together. They observed how mixing can transform into a cupcake. They especially enjoyed adding frosting and cupcakes to the cupcakes. And I can tell you, because this is a school I work with, their overall topic was transformation.
I was just saying, that's what I said, what a great lesson was when she talked about transformation, because yeah, we all studied pumpkins around pumpkin time, but this transformation of how all these ingredients that you added then turn into a cupcake that you eat. A lot of children don't understand that the stuff that you buy was once just a mishmash of ingredients that were put together, so I feel like that's a really good lesson for them to see how things work, how things come together.
Yeah, this is terrific. And again, this is displayed where families could see it.
I like that.
So families come in and they look at these things and they read the board and they realize what children were learning, and they get to see pictures of the children doing it. Here's the one that super impressed Allison. It's a Venn diagram.
This one blew my mind a little bit, guys. Yeah, because I've never thought to do Venn diagrams with children in pre-K. I've done it with kindergarten, but to do it in pre-K, what a great idea, and plus that builds, because in kindergarten, that was one of our things that we had to learn was the Venn diagram, but to learn it earlier, that would have made everything so much easier.
Yeah.
But I also like this whole idea of we're comparing, and this is how we're going to compare.
Yeah. So they were learning compare and contrast and diagramming.
Yeah.
Again, this was
really
pre-K. Cool. They're comparing two buildings. And those of you who may not be as familiar with Venn diagrams, it's two circles that overlap. Yeah. The part that overlaps shows what both buildings had in common. And then the parts that don't overlap talk about the differences between one building and another, right? So one building was wide and the other was tall, the children decided. One building had lots of pointy roofs. The other building has so many holes like speakers, they said.
Lots of circles.
And lots of circles.
Accurate.
One building was colorful like a rainbow. On the other side, other circle, they put this building is not colorful.
I like the next one. This building definitely has an elevator.
Yeah, because it's tall. That's so funny. So funny. And then in the other building, they put most friends want to live in this building. So they liked that building.
Yeah, they like that building. It's different. I'll tell them that. But yeah. And then in the middle, it tells you what their commonalities are. Both buildings have places to go. Both buildings have windows and no doors. Both have walls at the top, and both have too many windows.
They have too many windows. Kids decided. But again, Venn diagramming. I don't remember doing that when I was in preschool. So that's pretty impressive learning.
Right. I think it's great.
Yeah.
What a great way to display things, and get their mind thinking not these buildings are very, very different, but there's also stuff in common. You know, there's always stuff in common, no matter how different we are. I think that's a great lesson too.
And this is a teacher who is really great at Venn diagramming. She does Venn diagrams for a lot of things, this sort of thing, literature, like where there are books that are similar.
Yeah.
She'll Venn diagram it. She's terrific at it.
Yeah.
And then finally, one more picture. I'm just going to show you one more, those of you who are on YouTube. This is what children learned about trees. There's just such great stuff. I was so impressed with what the children said. One of the answers that impressed me most was what Alyssa and Isabella talked about, and that's the fact that chocolate comes from trees. And I was reading this, I was standing in this class reading this chart, so impressed with all of it. Said to the kids, chocolate comes from trees. And we talked about the whole process from chocolate, cocoa bean to factory. I was so gratified that the children would go away thinking that, chocolate bars are hanging from trees, that they were being exposed to the fact that they come from beans, and here you can explore the beans, and here's what, then you show them a video of what happens. There are child-friendly videos about what happens at the factory with the beans, and so they learn chocolate comes from trees. They also learned about leaves changing color, how animals go inside of trees after the tree falls down. Mm-hmm. Interesting information for a child. They learned that ants and monkeys live in trees. So they were examining what sorts of animals use trees for their home and their shelter. I honestly, having shown this, and I'm going to come out of this screen share, having shown this, I am just not sure what further evidence our listeners would need about what deep and meaningful learning and planning that learning based on what we know about children's knowledge should look like.
Right. So for the peeps that are like, but we need evidence to send home to prove to parents that we're learning, send this home. All this, those kind of things, the charts, the graphs, the evidence of learning, that is what you should be sending home. You don't need a craft in order to prove that you did something that day.
Right.
Because there's so much going on.
Right. And when you consistently send this sort of thing home, the parents say, oh my gosh, this is going on all the time, this deeper level learning with my very, very young children.
Yeah.
Again, some of them were toddlers.
Right. Yeah. So it's like doing the craft takes time out of that kind of stuff that you could be doing. Correct. You should be concentrating on that kind of stuff, that learning, that evidence, not the craft that's going to get sent home.
Correct. And if any of the teachers whose work this is with the children are watching or listening, I want to just say, hey, thank you for when I was in your classrooms taking these pictures, and to the administrators for ensuring that they have photo permission if there are children involved. So thank you. I can't state this enough, that this, folks, along with the narrative of what state standards or whatever tool you use. Some of you may use, for example, HighScope's Core for your standards. Some people, and goals, some people might use Teaching Strategies goals for their goals and standards. There's lots of high quality research-based tools out there now for you to look at children's development and learning. Whatever it is you use the grown-up words from that when you're sending this home, and explain it to the families. They don't know why you're doing this. They need to understand the connection from what their children are doing in your preschool to later learning, because isn't that their main concern? That they won't be ready. They won't be ready for elementary school. They won't be ready for kindergarten. This is such evidence that they're going to be ready.
Yeah.
They're going to be so ready that we have done shared writing. We have done charting and graphing. We have done deep explorations and experiments. We are getting them ready for what they will experience.
Yeah. You as the teacher are the expert in early childhood learning. the parents aren't always, their main concern is, I want my child to be ready for kindergarten, whatever comes next. You are the expert in teaching those parents what will get them to that next level, and doing things like this and showing them and sending those things home. Then the parents will learn from you that this is what needs to happen.
I'm anticipating the next question we're going to get, Allison, in our email is probably going to be something like, but how do I show evidence that the children are learning literacy and math and the content areas that the families are so very interested in? So that feels like a different episode to me, Allison.
I'm writing that down.
Do that. Do that.
Okay.
And we can definitely do that in the future and talk about the sort of evidence that children are actually learning the function of letters and the function of numbers and how to communicate that with families.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I feel good about having shown that, and I hope that it inspires many of you to think about the sorts of activities you're doing. I'm glad you're inspired, Allison.
Totally doing a Venn diagram.
Please do many of them.
Yes. I can't wait.
Yeah, they're terrific. I wish somebody would have done Venn diagrams with me younger, because I was so confused by it, I think, as an elementary school student. I'm not, as I've mentioned many times, I am not a good math student, or was not anyway. And anytime they pulled out a chart, graph, diagram, or a word problem, I would get the cold sweats. So I hope that doing it younger prevents other children from sitting there like, oh no, not the diagram, the chart, the word problem. I can't do it.
Yeah. I feel like the more you expose them to at a younger age, the better they'll be, because it won't provide that anxiety that we got when we're like, oh no, Venn diagram, what?
So full of anxiety when you saw this stuff. When children are doing these things from as long as they can remember, it'll just go so much more smoothly for them.
Second nature. They're like, that's just what we do. That's how we chart our findings. We use a bar graph, or we use a Venn diagram. It just becomes second nature to them.
Right. And parents, if you're a parent listening to this, I'm going to leave you with this question. How do you want your child's early childhood teacher spending their time?
Yeah.
Because it is a choice, folks.
Yeah.
And what you saw, the evidence that you saw, children enjoyed doing.
They love doing
They love it. They love talking about what they know. They love providing their observations. They love seeing their words in writing by their name. They love it.
Yes.
So there you go. I leave you with that thought. How do you want the teacher to spend their time? And we will catch you next time on the podcast.
Yeah. Bye, peeps.
Just leave with that thought. See you next week.
Bye.